Hi, welcome to this short presentation on systematic innovation. My name is Vinay Dabholkar and I am a co-author of this book 8 Steps to Innovation. So let us explore together in this presentation what are these 8 steps and how they might be useful to you. There are 4 parts to this presentation. In the first part, we'll look at brief background that led to this framework, what kind of assumptions does it make, and so on. In the second part, we look at the way we have framed the challenge and some of the sub-problems associated with the key challenge. The third part, which is the bulk of the presentation, will look at the 8 steps and the framework. In the fourth and the final part, we'll look at a few scenarios and apply the 8 steps framework. Let's start with the brief background. When we started our research, one of the things we encountered through our consulting engagements was that the question people were interested in becoming more innovative had many associated constraints. For example, they said, we don't have a strategy yet, and yet you want to become more innovative. Some of them said, we can't hire and fire people. These are the people we have. Can we still become more innovative? And the third constraint was associated with budget. We only have so much budget. Can we still do something about it? The 3 things we assumed are: 1, innovativeness can be built like stamina. The positive side of this is anybody can start running and walking and eventually become a marathoner. Similarly, anybody can start becoming more innovative by practicing. The downside, you have to practice a lot. The second assumption, humans can't predict the future, especially when you have a big idea and a big bet. You can't predict the success of the big bet. The third assumption, we are not rational all the time. The decisions happen as an interplay between intuition and reason. And this intuitive mode of thinking, which is the elephant mode of thinking, can be very emotional. And when it is very emotional, it can be irrational. What are the influencers that led to this framework? The first one was usage of the word factory associated with innovation. There are many individuals who have contributed to this concept, but the two who stand out, one is Thomas Edison, who used the word invention factory and built an invention factory in 1880s, and over a period of 60 years he filed more than 1,000 patents, created new products and new businesses. The second person who we were influenced by was A.G. Lafley, who is the ex-CEO of Procter & Gamble, and he put in what is called innovation factory and increased the success rate of big bets in the company from 15% to 50%. The second major influence was a book, 40 Years, 20 Million Ideas by Yuzo Yasuda. In this book, he captures implementation of idea management system in Toyota. If we look at a few years out of this table of long 36 years journey, we can see that idea per person per year has gone up from 0.1 to 48 in those years. Participation has gone up from 8% to 95 and adoption from 23 to 96%. What this shows us is that yes, it's indeed possible to systematically become more innovative. At the same time, it takes a long time. The third example comes from Tihar jail. In 1993, it was described as filthy and corrupt. Same vessels were used for cooking and washing clothes, garbage was not collected, extremely low literacy. But fast forward 20 years, and as the picture depicts, Tihar jail, which is the largest prison in Asia, has campus recruitment. The revenue from products manufactured in Tihar is now 30 crores or plus. There are people who are writing IAS and MBA exams from within the jail, and there's summer and winter Olympics, which means even a place like jail can become more innovative. So if Tihar jail can become more innovative, why can't you? Another trigger came from my co-author, Professor Rishikesha Krishnan. He had earlier written a book called From Jugaad to Systematic Innovation, which took a regional or countrywide ecosystem view of innovation. And his friends from industry were asking him, tell us what we can do in an organizational context to go from jugaad to systematic innovation. Now let's turn to part 2, where we understand the challenge we framed and the sub-problems associated with it. How can we become more innovative? One view is the DNA view, which says that only certain people with certain DNA can become more innovative. The second is only if you graduate from a certain elite institute can you become more innovative. And third is anyone can view. This is the view we belong to. So how do we become more innovative systematically? The three parts which are important. We emphasize teams, which is either a small team like 5-member team or a large business. The second is more, which implies that we need to have some ways of measuring the progress. And third is systematically, which means there are some steps like 8 steps. When we see innovation as a funnel of ideas coming in at one end and slowly becoming productized and commercialized, we divided this into 3 sub-problems. One is the pipeline problem, which is to build a pipeline of ideas. The second is the velocity problem, which is to move these ideas forward through this funnel. And third is batting average problem, which means to create large business impact through both singles and sixers, which is like small ideas and big bets, and having a success rate of the big bets to a reasonable extent. Now let's look at the 8 steps framework. The 3 problems, which is pipeline, velocity and batting average, were responded with 3 steps for pipeline, 3 steps for velocity and 2 steps for batting average. Now let's look at each of these steps briefly. Part 1 is building a pipeline. Step 1 is laying the foundation, and one of the key elements of this is to put an idea box or idea management process in place. Just putting a box is not enough. So we look at different levers. One lever is source, another is scope, and third is sponsorship. What is the source? Who can give ideas? Do you have clarity about that? What kind of idea is okay? Is it just patents, HR process, finance process? That's the scope. And how do you sponsor promising ideas? That's the sponsorship lever. So if you establish clarity on these aspects, then that helps make the idea box work better. Idea management is just one of the elements. The other elements are buzz creation, which is to organize events like hackathon, innovation day, publishing newsletters, and training and development, which is to teach or train people on methodologies such as PRIZ, design thinking. What can I do day to day? One is collect innovation stories, publicize them, organize trainings. Step 2 is create a challenge book. What's a challenge book? Let's look at a few examples. A smoker might say, find a healthy substitute for smoking, like sugar-free. That would be his challenge. A tractor manufacturer might say, how do we get a tractor in every farm? And an MBA program might say, get more companies for campus placement. We identified 3 sources of challenges. One is a pain, what we are pained about. Second is waves, such as technology waves, regulatory waves, cultural waves. And third is waste of materials, human resources, computing resources, and so on. What can we do day to day? Identify top 3 challenges and display in your office or corridor and see what happens. For all you know, the challenge might become alive and people may start responding to it. Step 3 is build participation. How do we get more and more people involved around your challenge? One of the ways we identify is illustrated through this advertisement from Intel. They show that Ajay Bhatt, who is a co-inventor of USB, entering a cafeteria and really admired and looked, people just go to him for signature and so on, and they say, look, our rock stars are different from yours. Every organization have rock stars who are doing great on innovation. Can you spot them and publicize them? Those are internal role models that inspires a lot of people in the organization to innovate. Another one is be a catalyst. What's a catalyst? Who is a catalyst? When somebody comes to you saying, I have an idea, how do you respond? Do you say, look, sorry, we don't have budget this quarter? Or do you say, great idea, when can you show me a demo? The second response shows that you're listening to him, encouraging him, and perhaps giving some direction on the demo. So a catalyst helps in communication, clarification, and connection. What can I do day to day? Be a catalyst. Budget 15 minutes per week for listening to others' ideas. Spot internal role models and socialize them. Let's come to part 2, which is improving idea velocity. Step 4 is low cost, high speed experimentation. Let's look at an example of a person who was trying to build a watch for the blind. He decided to use ball bearings for shorthand and longhand. His first prototype was built in, guess how many days? Less than a day, using less than 20 Lego pieces. Then his next prototype was a 3D printed watch. You can see a ball bearing there. And that was done in less than a week. And when he took this watch for testing, the first question he was asked was, how does it look? He didn't even anticipate it. And hence he decided to build a good looking watch for the blind. So the important thing is low cost, high speed experimentation helps us get quick feedback and revise the requirements. In a services context, a set of people observe that when people come to hospitals, especially in a place like India, there are a lot of relatives which accompany the patient, and they're just waiting for the patient. What they decided is, these are the people who care about the patient the most. Why don't we train them on how to take care of the patient? And in one day's time, they organized a workshop and trained these people who are waiting for their patient. The pilot was hugely successful, and a lot more people were interested in getting this training. That's how the company Nura Health came about. So the point is, do low cost and high speed experiments and quickly test your ideas. When you do experimentation, many are going to be failures. But can you fail smartly? That's the question these companies ask. And what they did was they started rewarding smart failures. Procter & Gamble, for example, institutionalized President's Fail Forward Award, which is given to an innovation project which is smart and yet failed. Tata Group started Dare to Try Award, which also resulted in failure of smart projects. What can I do day to day? Identify, perform, and encourage low-cost experimentation. Mention experimentation efforts in team meetings, both successes and failures. Step 5 is find a champion. On the left hand side, we see George Fernandez, who was a railway minister in India, and he decided to pursue an idea of coastal railway connecting Bombay and Bangalore. The budget requirement was huge, way beyond railways budget. So what did he do? He met chief ministers of various states, planning commission, prime minister, and removed the hurdles that was preventing the idea to move forward. And such a person we call a champion. The main point is an idea finds a champion or dies. So what do you do to find a champion? Design a good pitch. And how do you design a good pitch? There are three characteristics which are important: curiosity, credibility, and concreteness. To look at an example, in Steve Jobs' iPod launch presentation, he uses these questions: why music? Then he goes about mentioning what it is. Then he says, what is iPod? And then talks about the features of iPod. That's building curiosity flow. If you're Steve Jobs, you don't need credibility, but for most of us, one can build credibility by showing options before showing the solution the way it is shown in this presentation. And concreteness is showing a demo. So if you want to show that the iPod can fit into your pocket, actually show that it fits into your pocket. What can I do today? Learn to champion a challenge. Be a mentor to idea authors in preparing presentations. Step 6 is iterate on the business model. Shadi.com, the company when it started in 97, it actually thought boy and girl are their customers. But it turned out they were not that time. It were the parents and aunts who were the customers. And what were they offering? Online. Well, that was not what was the parents were used to. So they had to open Shadi Point centers. And how did they get money? Through subscription? No. Only after proposal success did they get some money. So they had to iterate on various elements of the business model to figure out who their customer is, what to offer, and how to reach and how to make money. What can I do day to day? Ask, who is my customer? What do I offer? And how do I reach the customer, and how do I make money? And experiment at this. Now let's move to part 3, which is increase batting average. One enabling element that we look at in step 7 is innovation sandbox. What's a sandbox? Just like kids who within the boundary of a sandbox can do a lot of experimentation, sandbox starts with a few constraints where a huge number of experimentation can happen. One example is Tata Nano, which started with 3 constraints: 4-wheel transport, safety, and 1 lakh price tag. Of course, those constraints got modified over the years, but they performed huge number of experiments to decide whether the body should be steel or plastic, engine should be front or back, it should be 2-door or 4-door, and so on. Google's search sandbox, guess how many experiments were carried out in 2010? 20,000. And how many went live? 500. That gives us some idea as to the capacity for experimentation that a sandbox creates. What can I do day to day? Ask, can we build a sandbox around an emerging trend which can possibly lead to a big bet? Step 8 is build a margin of safety. This is illustrated in this autobiographical narrative by K. Vaitishwaran, Failing to Succeed, the story of India's first e-commerce company, India Plaza. What happened was when a lot of creditors were not getting payments and there was a debt spiral in which the company got into, they started harassing the founders. In fact, they brought thugs and all kinds of things to make the life miserable. This can put you into a depression, and that's really not something you want to get into. So what can one do? How do we build margin of safety? The idea is, could we do a pre-mortem, an exercise where you actually imagine all these worst case scenarios and then see what can be done about them. What can I do day to day? Perform a pre-mortem, especially for a big bet, and take actions to avoid catastrophic risks. Now let's briefly look at three scenarios and see how 8 steps can be applied. Let's look at three personas. One is Restless Ravi, a young boy who wants to build a cool product. Second is Manager Manju. She wants to automate routine tasks in the team. And third is Vice President Vipin, who would like to use Internet of Things for preventive maintenance. What can Restless Ravi do? He can start with step 2 by start by building a challenge book. What are the kind of challenges around which he wants to build his product? And how would he know? Well, he needs to perform low cost, high speed experiments, build prototypes, and see whether he can build them, whether customers actually find them valuable. And then, if he finds a good prototype which he feels is valuable, he can do step 5, which is make a good pitch and present them to investors and find a champion. Manager Manju, who wants to automate routine tasks, she can announce a challenge campaign. Step 3, invite participation. And step 4, organize a hackathon where a lot of experiments will be performed. And step 5 is she needs to select a few promising solutions and give them some resources and time to take the ideas forward. What can Vice President Vipin do, who would like to use Internet of Things for preventive maintenance in his factory? He needs to identify a few use cases where IoT can be used for preventive maintenance. Then take one and do a pilot project, which is this low cost, high speed experimentation. And step 7 is, once he finds this approach promising, he needs to build infrastructure where IoT devices can be used and a lot of experiments can be performed to see what is the best way to take this across his factory. Thus, we looked at 8 steps to innovation which address the challenges of pipeline, velocity, and batting average. Hope you can use some of them in your own context. Thank you.